Hey guys, tonight we're heading into a world where onions are holy, cats are practically royalty, and you, yes, you, are an ancient Egyptian trudging through temple sand in your best linen wrap. The torches flicker, stone walls press close. A low, distant purr seems to echo in the darkness. A carved feline stares down at you from every pillar, her eyes glinting like moonlit obsidian. And just past that statue, are those garlands of onions? Yup, you're not hallucinating. Here's the strange part. If you lived here, you'd probably cry more over an onion than your dead uncle. And you'd definitely get in trouble for stepping on the temple cat's tail. One swipe of her paw, and boom, cursed for eternity. Or maybe just fined, depending on the priest's mood. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking through the grand temple of Bastet in Bastet. Huge columns surround you, carved with dancing priestesses and wide-eyed cats. The air is warm and dry, with a hint of something smoky and oniony wafting through. It's not a soup kitchen, it's the smell of reverence. That rich scent was part of temple life. Imagine frankincense mixed with garlic and something vaguely eye-watering. You try not to sneeze. To your left, a row of seated cat statues stretches toward the altar. They're not cute cartoonish kittens. These are regal, poised, and vaguely menacing, like they're judging your sock choice. Their eyes are inlaid with precious stones, their collars etched with gold leaf. At the feet of one lies a small pile of offerings, dried fish, carved amulets, and there it is again, a plump white onion. You watch as a woman steps forward, bows deeply, and gently places another onion in front of the statue. Her lips move in a silent prayer. Maybe she's asking for protection. Maybe she's begging for healing. Maybe she just really needs her cat to stop pooping in the granary. And here's the kicker. She's not weird. She's not the eccentric one. She's normal. Because to ancient Egyptians, cats and onions weren't just useful. They were sacred. Spiritual, practical, and powerful all at once. See, cats weren't just fuzzy little carnivores to them. They were divine guardians. The physical embodiment of Bastet, the goddess of home, fertility, music, and protection. The ideal multitasker. She was often shown as a lioness or a woman with a cat's head. Which, by the way, would be terrifying to run into in a dark alley. Or a well-lit one. Now onions, on the other hand, were a bit more layered. I had to. You knew I was going to. Egyptians believed onions had special properties. Their circular shape symbolized eternity. Their layers represented the complexity of life. Their strong smell was thought to repel evil spirits, much like modern gym socks. So, you'll find onions not just in food, but in tombs, on altars, and even tucked into mummified bodies. But we'll get to that weirdness later. As you pass a row of wall paintings, you spot scenes of daily life. Farmers harvesting onions, children playing with kittens, scribes drawing up onion tax ledgers, probably wishing they'd studied magic instead. These were everyday things, but also holy things. And if something was both useful and sacred in Egypt, it became central to the culture. And sometimes, kind of ridiculous. Let's talk cats again. You reach the inner courtyard, where actual, living cats roam freely. Sleek and graceful, they weave between tourists. Worshippers, legs like they own the place. Which, let's be honest, they kind of do. One hops up onto a pedestal and curls up like she's just claimed a new throne. No one shoos her away. You wouldn't dare. Killing a cat in ancient Egypt, accidentally or not, was a crime so serious, people would straight up riot over it. Historians still argue whether people were ever executed for harming cats, or if that's just ancient rumor mill gossip passed along by confused Greeks. But we know this. Cats were treasured enough to be mourned, mummified, and immortalized in stone. They were also sometimes traded, gifted, and, shockingly, kidnapped by enemy nations. Yes, catnapping was an actual ancient military concern. We'll dive into that juicy drama later. And while cats ruled the spiritual and domestic space, onions slayed in the practical realm. Not only were they eaten daily, raw, cooked, or pickled, but they were used in medicine, embalming, and even as payment for workers. You can practically hear the ancient HR rep. 2 onions a day, plus dental, and a free cat for pest control. Not a bad benefits package. There's even a legend, fringe, but fun, that onions were placed in the mouths of the dead not just to feed them in the afterlife, but to remind them to speak no evil. I mean, nothing kills a conversation faster than onion breath from beyond the grave. You duck into a side chamber. It's dim, quiet, cooler here. Niches in the walls are stuffed with dried flowers, tiny amulets, and, you guessed it, onions. Some are perfectly preserved, their papery skins still clinging to bulbous flesh. Others are more decorative, carved from alabaster, painted in gold. Someone, at some point, thought, this onion deserves the royal treatment. And maybe it did. Your footsteps echo faintly as you retrace your steps, out through the columns, past the lounging cats, through the onion-scented courtyard. It's late now. The sky beyond the temple is bruised purple. A cool wind stirs the torch flames. You think of everything you've just seen. Cats treated like gods, onions offered like treasure, and the slow, strange realization that sometimes the things we take for granted, our pets, our food, our stinky vegetables, were once sacred beyond belief. You pause at the threshold, catching one last glimpse of a statue's golden eyes watching you. She blinks. Okay, probably not. But still, you walk a little faster. You're outside now, but the scent of incense and onion clings to your tunic like a loyal ghost. The sun has dipped behind the Nile's western bank, painting the sky in bands of orange and amethyst. You follow a narrow path that snakes along the edge of the city, where humble mud brick homes lean into one another like old friends. The air is cooling, just barely, but the smell, oh, it's still there. That smoky oniony perfume seems to drift through everything. At the corner of a modest square, a low-slung brazier smolders with sweet resin. An old man tends it, tossing in pinches of dried herbs and something that looks suspiciously like sliced shallots. You inch closer. The smoke swirls upward, not choking, but definitely sharp. Your eyes water slightly. The man nods to you, like you're in on something big. You smell that, he rasps, barely above a whisper. That's protection. He's not talking about your standard bug repellent kind of protection. In ancient Egyptian belief, that onion-infused smoke was doing triple duty, honoring the gods, repelling evil spirits, and maybe just keeping your neighbor's bad luck from hopping over the fence. See, you've stepped into the era where everything had meaning, smell, shape, color, texture. And onions, with their concentric circles, strong smell, and magical association with regeneration, were something of a spiritual Swiss Army knife. They warded off curses. They healed wounds. They sweetened the breath of mummies, or so the priests hoped. And when paired with incense and temple rituals, they created a fragrant force field, invisible but potent. Meanwhile, from across the square, a purring presence glides into view. A cat. She's sleek, elegant, and clearly well-fed. You watch her stroll past the brazier like she's walking a red carpet. No fear of flames. No hesitation. Just supreme confidence. This isn't a stray. This is temple royalty on a neighborhood tour. The old man watches her too. She brings good sleep, he says, as if that's obvious. And it sort of is. Ancient Egyptians believed cats could protect your dreams. Not just metaphorically, but literally. Their presence was said to keep away night terrors, wandering spirits, and those nasty, sand-dwelling demons that occasionally popped up in scary bedtime stories. Historians still argue whether cats were actually trained for any religious rituals, or if their role was more symbolic, a living representation of the goddess Bastet. Either way, their presence in temples and homes alike was both spiritual and deeply personal. Egyptians didn't just admire cats, they loved them. You could get a tattoo of one, name your kid after one, leave your estate to one. And that's not a joke. A few scholars believe high-status cats had assigned caretakers and wills, with funds to maintain their pampered lifestyles. Imagine trying to explain that to your jealous nephew. Sorry, the house goes to mittens. You can sleep by the fish pond. Back on the street, you follow the cat. She leads you to a smaller shrine, built into the side of someone's home. Here, there's no gold, no towering pillars, just a little recessed nook filled with simple offerings. A ceramic bowl of milk, a feather, and, of course, a small red onion, peeled just enough to glisten. You kneel and peer inside. The wall is painted with a rudimentary cat figure. Big eyes, long tail, standing beside what could be a sunbeam or a loaf of bread. Ancient art didn't always go for accuracy. What strikes you isn't the shrine's detail, it's its presence. A tiny sacred space in an ordinary home. That's how it worked here. The divine wasn't locked in temples. It wandered the streets. It napped on your roof. It curled at your feet and sometimes stole your fish. And the onions? Those were your defense system. A ward against spiritual invasion. When the sun went down and the house darkened, you'd crush a clove and place it by your pillow. Just in case. Maybe it helped. Maybe it didn't. But you slept easier either way. You leaned back against the wall, watching the horizon fade from amber to violet. From another alley, a child laughs. The same cat reappears and perches beside you like a sleepy guardian. Her tail wraps around your ankle. And you realize you're comfortable here. It's odd, sure, but deeply human. In the distance, bells chime. Not for prayer this time, but for the evening market. You follow the sound toward the square again. Lanterns flicker to life, revealing stalls laden with garlic, lentils, dried fish, and more onions than you've ever seen in one place. Big ones, small ones, some braided into necklaces. You pick up one that's been carved with tiny hieroglyphs. A symbol for protection. A scarab. A squiggly line that might mean health or please don't sneeze. It's part food, part charm, part handwritten letter to the gods. One vendor explains that it's meant to be burned at dawn to protect travelers. You ask what happens if you eat it. She shrugs. You smell blessed for a week. Quirky detail time. Some ancient Egyptians believed that onions sweat in the heat, literally exuding sacred juices. They thought the dew on an onion's skin wasn't just condensation, but proof of divine energy. You know, like holy sweat. Delightfully gross. But hey, maybe that's where modern detox trends get their vibe. The cat circles your legs again, rubbing her cheek along your calf like she owns you. She might. Honestly, you're okay with it. Just as you're about to leave, you see a priestess moving quietly through the market. She's collecting small items. Anise, oil, bread, and yes, onions, for an upcoming moon ritual. She nods at the cat and murmurs something in greeting. The cat responds with a chirp, and the two part ways like old colleagues. You wonder if the cat has more temple access than you do. The stars are coming out now. The sky is full of them, blinking like cat eyes, or maybe the layers of a cosmic onion peeled back one by one. It's funny how the sacred can be so ordinary, and how the ordinary, like a vegetable or a lazy pet, can end up sacred. You pass the brazier again. The old man is gone. Just the smoke remains, curling into the night, sharp and sweet. You take one last look at the cat, now silhouetted against the stars. She doesn't blink, just watches. Regal, patient, possibly omniscient. You smile, wipe your teary onion eyes, and step back into the darkness. By the time you reach the temple outskirts, the night sky is velvet and full of secrets. The moon hangs low and wide, like an ancient mirror reflecting your curiosity back at you. The breeze carries sand and silence, until a low, rhythmic chanting drifts your way. You follow the sound, instinct guiding your steps like a thread in a labyrinth. Through a stone archway half swallowed by shadow, you step into a smaller sanctuary, the sacred space of Bastet, feline goddess of protection, fertility, music, perfume, and very possibly, minding her own business with flair. You remember her from earlier, sleek cat head, woman's body, giant earrings, always depicted mid-sachet. You're not alone. Several priestesses move gracefully about the chamber. Their robes whisper along the stone floor, and their bare feet leave no sound. At the center, surrounded by flickering oil lamps and bowls of rosewater, sits a living cat, a real one, black as ink, with eyes like gold coins held to the fire. No one tells her what to do. She just is. One of the priestesses kneels before her, slowly brushing her fur with a carved ivory comb. The cat stretches, licks a paw, and blinks as if to say, "You're welcome for my presence." And honestly, you get it. This isn't just a ritual, it's reverence. Bastet's temple cats weren't just sacred symbols. They were living extensions of the goddess herself. Historical fact time. The city of Bastet's cult center, was so famous for its cat worship that it hosted massive festivals in her honor. We're talking music, dancing, feasting, people getting gloriously rowdy in the goddess's name. Ancient graffiti suggests that beer flowed like the Nile, and everyone went home hoarse from singing. Back here in the dim temple, though, things are quiet, devotional, intimate. A second priestess appears holding a shallow dish. She places it before the cat, who inspects it with exactly the same energy as a modern cat sniffing a new brand of food. You peek. What's in the dish? Small pieces of roasted duck, a little fish, and, yep, a sliver of onion. Raw. It's probably not for eating. Symbolic offerings like this were common in temple rituals, sacred gestures of respect to the gods. You wonder if Bastet enjoys the smell, or if she just tolerates it for the sake of her worshippers. Historians still argue whether the temple cats were trained to participate in these rituals or simply allowed to observe like celebrity guests at a fancy gala. Either way, they were pampered. You've heard of cat worship before, but this is full-on spiritual cohabitation. You move deeper into the chamber and notice murals depicting the goddess herself. Sometimes she's a woman holding a sistrum, a musical rattle. Other times she's fully feline, walking upright like some ancient cartoon come to life. In every scene, there are cats, dozens of them, lounging, dancing, even fighting off serpents in one epic battle mural. It's not just art, it's theology. In the center of one painted panel, Bastet holds a child on her lap, her golden eyes soft and protective. Beside her, a stylized onion ring, not the fast food kind, but an elegant circle with lines indicating layers. It's subtle, but it's there, a sign of fertility, eternal life, and the many roles this goddess plays. You sit on a stone bench and feel the centuries pressing in. The ritual continues before you, the priestesses moving in practiced harmony. One begins a slow chant, her voice rising and falling like the breath of the temple itself. Another sprinkles dried petals and bits of onion peel into a bowl of smoldering charcoal. The scent rises, curling into your nostrils, floral, smoky, pungent. It's oddly calming. A few tourists would gag. You feel centered. Quirky tidbit incoming. Some ancient texts claim that Bastet could take on a wrathful form called Sekhmet, a lion-headed goddess of war and plague. Basically, she could flip from chill house cat to angry lioness real quick. Some legends even say Bastet was Sekhmet after she'd calmed down a bit. Like, post-snack version. It's kind of adorable and terrifying. Divine duality in fur. Suddenly, the black cat stands. She stretches, tail high, and steps slowly down from the altar. Every priestess pauses. A moment of breathless reverence. She circles the room once, brushing against one robe, one foot, one bowl. Then she hops up onto a second platform and flops down, belly exposed. You suppress a laugh. The goddess has decided. Belly rubs are acceptable. A priestess kneels, gently touching the fur with reverent fingers. It's both funny and sacred, this mingling of divine presence and utter catness. The casual arrogance, the purring authority. You wonder, maybe that's why cats appealed so much to the Egyptians. They were graceful, lethal, affectionate, and unapologetically themselves. Just like the gods. Open scholarly debate time. Some believe the rise of cat worship in Egypt was primarily due to their pest control skills, saving grain, reducing disease, making life just slightly less horrible. Others argue it was the mystical behavior, the way cats seemed to sense unseen forces. Some even think cats were simply the right mix of mysterious and practical. Everything ancient religion loved. You're jolted from your thoughts by a soft bell. The ritual is ending. The priestesses bow low. The cat yawns, then curls up like a cinnamon roll and goes to sleep, clearly exhausted by all the reverence. You leave the chamber, quieter now. The breeze outside has cooled even more, brushing your face like a sigh. You're thinking about how odd it is, how a creature that knocks cups off counters today was once a symbol of cosmic balance. But maybe that's the point. Sacred things often wear ordinary shapes. And maybe, just maybe, that old tabby on your couch is a distant cousin of Bastet herself. Minus the incense and jewelry. You chuckle softly, and you keep walking. Toward more stories, more weirdness, and yes, probably more onions. The temple fades behind you, and now the world grows quieter. Dust swirls in the moonlight. Somewhere in the dark, a donkey brays with sleep-deprived frustration. You wander along a path paved in uneven limestone, your sandals scuffing as you reach a small necropolis on the city's edge. You wouldn't expect a place full of dead people to smell like an aggressive salad. But here we are. A tomb stands open, halfway unearthed, its walls painted with scenes of the afterlife. Anubis stands beside a golden scale. The deceased is being judged, but not harshly. He's passing with flying colors, feather light, and heart unburdened. There, beside the offering table, sits the familiar symbol, a perfectly round onion. You step inside, past old paint and cool stone. You run your fingers across hieroglyphs that tell a story. The tomb's owner was a royal baker. Not a general, not a priest, just a guy who knew his way around wheat and yeast. But still, nestled beside his mummified remains are his most prized possessions: a wooden spoon, a carving of a cat, and several desiccated onions wrapped carefully in linen. And you think, why the heck are people burying onions with their dead? Mainstream historical fact alert. Egyptians often buried onions with mummies, believing they had magical properties that helped the dead breathe, see, and speak in the afterlife. The layers represented eternal life. Their strong smell? A ward against rot, evil, and possibly nosy afterlife demons who hate vegetables. Even more curiously, archaeologists have found onions in the bodies, tucked in the chest cavity, stuffed under the skin, and most famously, nestled into the eye sockets like tiny, crunchy contact lenses. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic, ritualistic, or just some embalmer's idea of a practical joke. You kneel and peer into the burial niche. There's no glittering treasure, but there is reverence. Every item placed here was meant to serve the spirit forever. You imagine waking up in the afterlife with itchy bandages and a dry throat, only to find a snack and your favorite cat figurine waiting nearby. Not bad. Suddenly, your nose twitches. Something still faintly pungent. You lean down. Yes, unmistakable. Even after centuries, some of the scent remains. You're literally smelling ancient history. It's like time traveling through your sinuses. You retreat from the tomb and dust off your hands. Outside, an older man waves you over. He's standing beside a stone box, less grand than a tomb, more like a bread oven. He pries it open with a practiced motion, revealing a cat mummy wrapped in coarse linen. Its form is tight, careful, almost loving. The little body is curled, paws drawn in, tail looped around. The cloth has darkened with age, but someone once bound it with precision, as if preserving not just an animal, but a relationship. He gestures for you to look closer. At the cat's eye sockets. You blink. No. Really? Yep. Tiny, papery onions. Placed where the eyes would have been. Not full bulbs, but enough to suggest sight. Sight for what? For seeing in the next world? For spying on intruders? For watching over the family left behind? No one knows for sure. Theories swirl like desert winds. Some say the onions were offerings to Bastet. Others think they were simply symbolic. Vision, clarity, protection. One particularly imaginative theory claims that onions help the soul cry its way into rebirth. Honestly, not the worst metaphor you've heard tonight. As the old man rewraps the cat, you think about mourning. In ancient Egypt, when a beloved cat died, the entire household would shave their eyebrows in grief. That was the tradition. No formal eulogies, just everyone walking around with bare brows, looking startled and solemn for weeks. And if a really sacred temple cat passed away, full funeral rites, mummification, offerings, a literal cat procession, with mourners weeping and incense billowing. You wonder if the onions were for flavor, fragrance, or just part of the sacred send-off. Quirky tidbit. Some onions were placed between layers of bandages on human mummies, like protective sandwich fillings. The more layers of cloth, the more potential oniony interludes. One pharaoh's embalming report includes onions placed beneath the tongue, possibly to sweeten speech for the gods, or to keep his royal breath from knocking out Osiris himself. You walk a bit farther and find yourself beside another set of burial niches. Smaller, shallower. These weren't for nobles. These were for workers, scribes, midwives, people who lived full lives but didn't build pyramids or consult the gods. Even here, even among these modest graves, there are traces. Onion remnants. A carved cat figurine tucked beside a pottery jar. Reverence, even without riches. It's touching, human, universal. The moon slips behind a cloud. The air grows cooler, heavier. You sit on a stone slab, and close your eyes. For a moment, you picture your own afterlife kit. A flashlight, a favorite hoodie, that one weird mug you like, maybe an onion ring and a cat meme printed on papyrus. Then again, maybe the Egyptians had it right. Maybe you just need the basics, a guide, a guardian, and something that makes you cry in a good way. You rise and start walking again, your path lit by memory and moonlight. In your pocket, a small keepsake from the priestesses, an onion peel folded around a carved wooden cat. It crackles softly as you move. You don't mind. Let it stay there. Let it guard your dreams. Because who knows? Maybe cats and onions still work their magic. The necropolis fades behind you like a dream you almost remember, half onion-scented, half paw-print soft. You keep walking, back toward the beating heart of the city, where torches glow and the hum of life resumes. But something else pulls your attention first. You duck behind a low stone wall and into a granary. Or rather, what used to be a granary. Now it's a cracked shell, a ruin swallowed by time. But once, this was a storehouse of power, and cats ruled it. You tread carefully over packed earth floors, your feet stirring faint traces of grain. The smell here is different. Musty, yes, but with a faint warmth. Like old bread. You imagine the place bustling. Workers hauling sacks of barley, scribes recording tallies, guards posted to fend off greedy fingers. But lurking behind all of them, sleek and silent, cats. Not just tolerated, they were invited. Encouraged. Given the run of the place. Because in a land where a single rat could ruin a harvest, cats were more than pets. They were guardians of survival. Mainstream historical fact. Granaries were often protected by temple cats and their free-roaming cousins. Their role wasn't ceremonial, it was critical. They kept vermin at bay, protected food supplies, and, in some cases, were rewarded with extra rations. Some ancient murals even show cats sitting smugly next to piles of grain, like mafia bosses overseeing tribute. You crouch beside a low wall and imagine a cat slinking through that gap, eyes glowing, tail twitching. Somewhere in this grainy, papyrus-covered economy, a cat just earned herself a bonus mouse and a pat on the head. Historians still argue whether cats were ever officially employed in state functions like temple watchkeeping or warehouse pest control, but the evidence suggests they were indispensable. You didn't just want a cat, you needed one. Or 5. And if a thief or enemy tried to poison the granary, you'd better believe the cats would sound the alarm. Well, okay, not sound so much as silently judge the offender until someone else showed up. You reach the far end of the ruin and spot an old fresco. Time and dust have dulled it, but the meaning is clear. A man kneeling before a cat, offering a fish. Above them, the image of Bastet, watching with narrowed eyes. Below them, a plump onion, carved into the floor like a blessing. You chuckle. Cats and onions, always side by side. And here's the weird thing. Onions weren't just sacred or symbolic. In situations like this, they were literal defenses. Some Egyptian farmers reportedly hung onions at the granary entrance, believing the smell would repel both pests and petty criminals. A spiritual burglar alarm, if you will, and maybe just enough stink to make would-be looters think twice. Quirky tidbit. One rural belief claimed that rubbing an onion on the threshold of your home or granary would prevent snakes from crossing it. Why? Because snakes hate the smell, which honestly just sounds like a desperate hope wrapped in superstition. But who's to say? You lean against a broken pillar, the moonlight catching the worn carvings. Your mind drifts, imagining grain stolen in the dead of night, only for a shadow to move. A flash of eyes, the whisper of claws, and the thief scurrying away, humiliated by a house cat. In fact, there's a story, half myth, half maybe true, of a thief who tried to bribe a cat with fish to let him pass. The cat took the fish, then yowled loud enough to wake the dead. Not out of loyalty, just because the fish wasn't fresh enough. Classic. You wander into an adjoining storeroom, smaller, quieter. The scent of old herbs lingers here. Maybe mint, maybe dried onion skins once used in poultices or spell work. The Egyptians loved their multi-purpose ingredients. If something healed the body, repelled demons, smelled weird, and made your breath questionable for 3 days, it was probably magical. A faded inscription on the wall lists supply amounts. Sacks of wheat, jars of honey, bushels of onions. Nothing about cats, but you know they were here. Their paws don't write, but they leave trails in every corner of this world. Open scholarly debate moment. Some Egyptologists argue that cats were selectively bred for domestic traits, even in ancient times. Others think they simply adapted themselves to human life, slinking in, winning hearts, and securing comfy granary-side sleeping spots through sheer charm. Either way, humans didn't domesticate cats. Cats domesticated granaries. You walk out into the night, now cooler and gentler. A modern dog might bark to announce itself. A cat? She's probably watching you already. You glance up at her roofline, and, yep, there she is. A slim silhouette perched like a gargoyle, tail twitching lazily. She's not afraid. She's curious. Maybe a descendant of the granary guardians. Maybe just some wanderer claiming this ruin as her own. You wave. She blinks. You imagine how important she would have been 2,000 years ago. Revered. Federal decorated with amulets. Maybe even painted into the wall of a storeroom. Eternally sleek and eternally smug. You sit for a moment on a sun-warmed stone and consider how deeply ordinary survival tied into ancient religion. Worship wasn't about grand temples all the time. It was about honoring the things that helped you make it to tomorrow, a well-stored sack of barley, a good hunting cat, and an onion that might heal your fever or frighten a ghost. Maybe that's the root of it. When you live on the edge of desert and floodplain, the sacred hides in your pantry. You lean back, your hand brushing a piece of something soft. You pick it up, an old cat collar. Just a leather strip with a faint engraving, but enough to feel like an echo. Someone loved their guardian enough to give her a name. Maybe it was Whisker. Maybe it was Defender of Grain. Maybe just Bastet's favorite. Whatever it was, she earned it. You rise, stretch, and step back into the moonlight, the collar still in your hand. Cats and onions. Guardians of grain. Keepers of balance. Saints of the soft and the stinky. You keep walking deeper into history. You leave the granary ruins behind and head toward the river, drawn by flickering torchlight and the low murmur of something solemn. It's not a celebration. It's a ritual. The kind that doesn't need music, just smoke, whispers, and a steady hand. You reach a sacred enclosure, stone walls marked with protective sigils, a ceremonial pit in the center, and rows of jars and offerings stacked along the perimeter. The smell hits you first, pungent, heady, and yes, unmistakably oniony. But not the gentle sweetness of a kitchen sauté. This is bold, sharp, laced with resin and thyme. It clings to the air like grief that's been cooking too long. You step closer and realize you're witnessing something few outsiders ever saw in full, a cat funeral. Not for a random pet, but for a temple guardian. A sacred feline, one of Bastet's own. She lies at the center of the pit, already partially wrapped in linen, her little body curled in rest. Around her, the priestesses move with quiet precision. One anoints her paws with oil. Another places offerings beside her, fish, milk, and a small, white onion bulb, sliced open but not disassembled. A symbolic breath. A whisper of eternity. Mainstream fact. Ancient Egyptians mummified animals, especially cats, in massive numbers. Some were offerings to gods. Others were companions sent to the afterlife. The process wasn't just about preservation, it was devotion. Some cat mummies even had tiny gold earrings or amulets tied into their wrappings, like divine accessories for the long journey ahead. One priestess begins to chant, a low, rhythmic invocation. Another lifts a carved jar and sprinkles dried herbs and what looks like crumbled onion peel over the body. The scent rises again. Smokier now, strong enough to sting your eyes. You're not crying. The onions are just doing their thing. Quirky detail alert. Ancient embalmers sometimes stuffed onions into the mouths of animal mummies too, believing it gave them a voice in the afterlife. So if Bastet wanted to hear her beloved feline's meows for all eternity, well, an onion was the sacred microphone. You lean against a pillar and watch, quietly amazed. There's no rushing, no efficiency, just deliberate reverence. Every bandage wrapped with care, every layer a lullaby. Eventually, the cat is fully wrapped. Her face is painted onto the linen, with wide almond eyes and a tiny, confident smirk. One of the priestesses places her gently in a stone box, tucks in the final offerings, and seals it with melted resin. A hush falls over the space. Even the insects seem to pause. And then, the burial begins. The box is lowered into a niche along the temple wall, where dozens, maybe hundreds, of other feline guardians rest. Tiny tombs stacked like spiritual archives. Some are marked with names, others with just symbols, a paw print, a sistrum, a spiral onion ring. You think of how many stories lie beneath the surface. Each cat once curled beside someone's fire, hunted in the temple halls, blinked lazily at passing priests. Each one was mourned, revered, preserved with such care that even now, millennia later, their existence still ripples. And the onions, always the onions, tucked into paws, slipped under tails, painted onto coffins. Historians still argue whether these onions were literal offerings or symbolic placeholders. Maybe both. A tool for crossing worlds. A bridge between the earthy and the divine. You move closer to a shelf of older mummies. One is cracked open, partially unwrapped. A paw peeks out, delicate, curled. Tucked beneath it, a garland of dried onion blossoms. You hadn't even realized onions bloomed. But here they are, delicate and papery, like forgotten secrets pressed in a book. You imagine someone crafting that garland, carefully choosing each flower, weaving them into a circle, maybe crying a little, maybe humming a song. Not because it was required, but because it mattered. Because love doesn't always look like roses and weeping. Sometimes it looks like preserving your friend with herbs and onions and quiet respect. Open scholarly debate. Some believe the massive number of mummified cats found in burial shafts suggests a religious industry, with breeding farms and factory-style mummification. Others argue that many cats were deeply loved, their funerals intimate and heartfelt. Likely, both. A mix of mass production and genuine grief. Of ritual and affection colliding in layers of linen and myth. You step back into the cool night, your clothes carrying the scent of oil, smoke, and spice. It clings to your skin like memory. Up ahead, a small boy kneels by a wall niche. He's lighting a tiny oil lamp. In his other hand, a pebble painted like a cat and a half-peeled onion bulb. He places both carefully in the niche, whispers something, and leaves. You smile, because whether you're a high priest or a barefoot kid, you understand. This matters. You find a low bench and sit, the heat of the earth seeping into your bones. You picture all those cat spirits, padding quietly through the reeds of the afterlife. Their little onion eyes blinking, their tails curled high, watching, always watching. You wonder if they still guard something now. Maybe not grain or temples, maybe just dreams. Morning drips into the sky like diluted gold as you walk toward a quieter part of town, the residential quarter. You've left behind the grandeur of temples, the haunting grace of tombs, the onion-stuffed mummies. Here, the streets are narrower, the walls of homes sun-dried and close together, and the air carries the earthy smell of warm bread, clay, and faintly, yes, still onions. You turn a corner and nearly trip over a lounging cat. She stretches, yawns with Olympic laziness, and goes right back to doing what cats do best, ignoring you. No collar, no jewels, no priestess trailing behind her. Just an ordinary cat, sunbathing like it's her part-time job. And yet, you notice something peculiar. Outside the doorway beside her is a small clay bowl of water, a scatter of fish bones, and, of course, a peeled onion slice, drying in the sun like an offering left by someone who couldn't afford frankincense. You glance at the house. Nothing fancy, but this little shrine, barely 2 bricks high, glows with care. And now it hits you. Worship didn't stop at the temple gates. In ancient Egypt, cats were part of the household pantheon. You step inside, following a friendly wave from the woman of the house. She's stirring something fragrant over a clay oven, while her youngest child plucks bits of onion skin and pretends they're beetle wings. In the corner, a well-fed cat grooms herself with the kind of dignity usually reserved for nobility. Her name is Nefret, the woman says, gesturing toward the cat. She guards us. You raise an eyebrow. From what? The woman grins. Snakes. Rodents. Nightmares. Mainstream fact. In many Egyptian homes, cats weren't just tolerated, they were honored. They kept the house clean of pests and, by extension, protected health, grain, and peace. They were thought to guard sleeping children from evil spirits. If your child stirred crying in the night, a cat's presence was seen as a protective charm. And let's be real, there's something comforting about a warm, furry presence curling up at your feet while you sleep. You sit on a cushion. The house is modest. Woven mats, low stools, sunlight streaming through slatted windows. But every surface tells a story. Painted pots feature cat motifs. Woven baskets carry tiny embroidered felines. And on a small altar beside the hearth, there's a carved statue of Bastet nestled between two dried onions and a feather. The woman brings you a drink, cool water with a touch of date syrup, and begins grinding something in a stone mortar. More onions? You ask. Always, she says with a wink. She's making a poultice for her father's bad knee. Crushed onion, a bit of resin, some honey. She presses the mixture into linen, folds it with care, and sets it aside. Quirky tidbit. Ancient Egyptian households often kept their own home remedies, and onions featured in nearly all of them. For everything from snake bites to toothaches, onion was either chewed, smeared, soaked, or burned. The same food you cried over at dinner could become your cure for insomnia. You hear the child giggle and glance over. He's trying to wrap the cat in a scrap of linen. She tolerates it for a grand total of 3 seconds before slipping free, licking her shoulder with deliberate indifference, and returning to her sunny patch. You can't help but laugh. The child looks sheepish. She lets him live, the mother says. So that's a blessing. You sip your drink and watch the quiet rhythm of the home. The chopping of herbs, the hum of chores, the gentle presence of the cat weaving between legs like a thread tying everyone together. Open scholarly debate moment. Some scholars argue that the worship of cats was exaggerated by later historians, particularly the Greeks, who loved a good story about those wacky Egyptians. Others believe that reverence for cats was deeply embedded in domestic life, but more practical than mystical, a way to protect the home, honor the divine, and ensure a sense of balance. Either way, it's clear that the relationship was mutual. Cats weren't enslaved, nor tamed in the modern sense. They chose to be there, and Egyptians welcomed them, honored them, and in many cases, loved them. You rise, thank the woman, and step back into the brightening street. All around, life is waking. A girl walks past with a bundle of reeds on her head. A vendor sets out bowls of lentils and olives. A boy chases a chicken, and 3 cats are already posted on rooftops like watchful spirits. You pass another house. This one has a larger courtyard, where someone has carved tiny footprints into the gate frame. Paw prints. Decorative? Protective? Both. A young man emerges from the house, holding a basket of fish in one hand and a bunch of onions in the other. He places the fish in a dish near the door. The onions go into a jar of vinegar to pickle. But before he closes the door, he gently pats the cat waiting on the threshold. Guard the house, he says casually, like saying see you later. And maybe that's what made this so special. The holiness wasn't flashy. It was built into the routine. You fed the cat not just because it was hungry, but because it brought safety. You hung the onion not just to cook it later, but to guard against disease, misfortune, or that one neighbor who always gave you bad vibes. As you walk on, you notice more of these tiny domestic rituals. Dried onion braids hanging over windows, cat statues near doorways, small offerings tucked into cracks in the wall. These weren't temples. They were homes. But in Egypt, the sacred didn't need pillars. It only needed space, care, and maybe one sleepy cat on a warm stone floor. You glance up. A cat watches you from a rooftop, and you nod, respectfully, because she's not just a pet. She's the night watch, the guardian, the unsmiling protector of this onion-scented, sun-drenched world. You leave the residential quarter with the scent of baking bread, cat fur, and vinegar-pickled onions still dancing in your nose. The day is rising fast now. Bright sun, warm wind, flies already starting their shift. You're heading toward the edge of the city, where the lines between homes, healing, and magic begin to blur. It's quieter here. Fewer street sellers. More herbal bundles hanging from doorways. You pass a weathered sign carved with the eye of Horus and an onion bulb wrapped in linen, a healer's mark. You duck beneath the low lintel and enter a space that feels part apothecary, part sanctuary. And wow, it smells strong in here. A woman stands at a stone counter, grinding something fierce in a bowl. You catch a blend of resin, smoke, mint, and, of course, freshly chopped onion. She doesn't stop as you enter, just waves you to a cushion and keeps working. My mother used this recipe, she says matter-of-factly. It fixes fevers, curses, and ex-boyfriends. You laugh. She does not. Mainstream historical fact. Onions were among the most used ingredients in ancient Egyptian medicine. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical texts we've found, lists onion-based remedies for dozens of ailments: respiratory issues, digestive trouble, toothaches, fatigue, infections, and, brace yourself, birth control. And they didn't just eat them. Onions were crushed, cooked, burned, soaked, and even inserted in ways we really don't need to revisit at bedtime. You watch as the healer mixes her paste, onion, honey, and fat, before smearing it on a linen strip. She nods toward the back room. Come. You follow her into a smaller chamber. A man lies on a reed mat, sweating and murmuring. His knee is swollen to twice its size. The healer kneels beside him, mutters a quick prayer to Sekhmet under her breath, then wraps the onion poultice around his leg with the practiced tenderness of someone who's done this too many times to count. The smell is robust. I could cook dinner on that leg, you mutter. She finally cracks a smile. Progress. Then she points to a jar by the wall, an oil steeped with what look like onion skins and dried catnip. She dips her fingers in and rubs it behind the man's ears. For his dreams, she says. Quirky tidbit. Egyptians believed that onions didn't just heal the body, they calmed the mind, particularly during sleep. Some even placed onion slices under their pillows to ward off nightmares. Combine that with a purring cat at your feet, and you had the ancient version of a weighted blanket and melatonin. You return to the main room. The healer offers you a cup of warm water infused with something faintly sweet and sulfuric. Drink. You sip. Surprisingly pleasant. Slightly tangy. A mix of dates and, you guessed it, onion extract. Good for the blood, she says. Historians still argue whether the medicinal use of onions was more effective or more symbolic. Did they actually help, or did people simply believe in their power so fully that it worked through sheer placebo? Hard to say, but considering how long the tradition lasted, something in those pungent bulbs must have clicked with both body and soul. You glance around the room. The walls are covered with drawings, figures holding onions aloft like torches, others applying them to wounds, some simply offering them to the gods. No distinction between medicine and magic. To the Egyptians, they were one and the same. The healer shows you a tightly wrapped scroll, unrolls it just enough to reveal a crude drawing. A woman in labor, two midwives beside her, and beside them, a large onion split in half. You ask what it means. For strength, she says. And then she adds, almost as an afterthought, also to distract the evil spirits with the smell. You can't argue with that. You help her prep another batch of paste. She hands you a small jar for just in case. You're not sure what situation calls for an emergency onion poultice, but it feels rude to refuse. Besides, it's kind of charming, in a garlic meets good karma sort of way. On your way out, she stops you. Wait. She reaches into a shallow bowl and pulls out a tiny, woven charm, a cat made of dried onion skin and thread. She places it gently into your hand. For luck. It crackles softly as you close your fingers around it. Outside, the wind has shifted. Warmer now. Busier. You step back into the day, but something's changed. You're carrying the scent of healing, the weight of ancient wisdom, and a newfound respect for the things people use to survive and sanctify. You pass another home, this one with a baby crying inside. A cat sits at the windowsill, eyes half shut, tail flicking lazily. You spot a small bowl nearby with milk and onion slivers. A lullaby in food form. Maybe it's strange to us, but to them, it was medicine, faith, comfort. You pause in the shade of a wall and breathe deeply. Sure, it still kind of smells like French onion soup left out in the sun. But now you understand. It's the smell of care, of effort, of life continuing against all odds. And maybe, tonight, you'll put that tiny onion cat charm by your pillow and see what kind of dreams it keeps away. The healer's charm still crackles faintly in your pocket as you stroll along the riverbank. The Nile flows beside you like a sleeping giant, unhurried, unknowable. Reeds rustle softly in the breeze, and boats drift lazily by, their sails catching the golden light. You're heading to a place not many people think to visit, a cat cemetery. Yes, you heard that right. Beyond the city's edge, where the sacred and the sanitary meet, lies a network of burial chambers carved into limestone cliffs. The entrance is modest, shaded by overgrown tamarisk trees and watched over by, you guessed it, a cat perched atop a crumbled column, flicking her tail like she's the gatekeeper. You nod your respects and duck into the cool darkness. It takes a moment for your eyes to adjust. Then you see it. Rows and rows of stone shelves, stacked with neatly wrapped bundles. Some small, some very small. All linen-bound. All once alive. And all cats. Mainstream fact. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of cat mummies in places like Saqqara and Bastet. Not one or two. Thousands. Some were buried individually with names and tiny sarcophagi. Others were stacked and stored like devotional currency, offerings for Bastet, purchased by pilgrims hoping to gain favor from the goddess. You walk slowly, your footsteps echoing. Each little bundle is wrapped with care, some painted with cat faces, others decorated with beads or crude amulets. The air smells of dry linen and long-forgotten herbs, and, faintly, the familiar ghost of onion. You pause at one display, where a cat sarcophagus carved from sycamore wood lies cracked open. Inside, the linen has mostly withered. But nestled near the skull, you see it again. 2 small onions, one tucked in each eye socket. You've seen this before, back in the tombs. But here, among hundreds of cat mummies, it feels different. Not royal, not elite, just ordinary worship, ordinary grief. Historians still argue whether all these mummies were truly beloved pets or mass-produced offerings. Evidence shows that some animals were raised in temples specifically to be sacrificed and mummified, a practice that raises modern eyebrows and ancient ethical questions. But mixed among them were clearly cherished companions, mummified not as merchandise, but as family. You reach a small chamber near the back. The air is thicker here. You light a small oil lamp and look around. This room is different. Here, the cats are surrounded by more offerings. Fish bones, dried flowers, amulets shaped like tiny mice, and yes, onions in every form. Whole bulbs, thin rings, painted medallions, even etched into the wall like celestial maps. And in the center, a larger, more ornate bundle. A cat mummy the size of a loaf of bread, but wrapped in silk-thin linen. Someone's treasure. You crouch to examine it. Painted onto the wrappings is a careful portrait. Sharp ears, tilted eyes, a look that says, "You better not touch my stuff." The little label beside her name reads simply, Nebbit. It means lady. Quirky tidbit. Some high-ranking temple cats were given full names, titles, and even epithets like she who brings sleep or mouse-eater of the East Wing. One inscription refers to a cat as Sistrum-voiced Bastet's favorite, which sounds like a sacred pop star, and we love that for her. You take a seat on the stone bench nearby and think about all the hands that wrapped these mummies, all the tears dried, all the little rituals performed. It wasn't about grandeur. It was about connection. Cats were everywhere in Egyptian life, domestic, divine, protective, and practical. And when they died, they weren't tossed aside or forgotten. They were mourned, and often buried with their most meaningful companions, onions. Open scholarly debate time. Were onions placed in cat burials because of spiritual beliefs, or simply because they were so ubiquitous in life that people couldn't imagine an afterlife without them? Did onions serve as food for the next world, protection, or symbolic offerings? Nobody agrees, but the evidence is literally baked into the limestone walls. You spot a small inscription above one niche. It's faded, but the translation reads, "May she walk in light and see through layers." You can't help but smile. It's perfect, because isn't that what onions are? Layers of mystery, built one atop the next. And cats? Always seeing through things we can't. Staring into corners we avoid. Sitting on your chest at 3 a.m. and blinking like they know something. You rise, nod to Nebbit, and extinguish your lamp. Outside, the sun is brighter now. A new day fully hatched. The Nile glints like a polished blade. And you, well, you smell faintly of dust and ancient vegetable. You climb the steps, returning to the present with a bit more reverence in your walk. There's something grounding about witnessing so much quiet care for the ordinary. It whispers that you too might be holy in your habits. That maybe leaving your cat's water bowl extra full is a sacred act. That maybe even your fridge onion has hidden symbolism waiting to be unwrapped. At the top of the hill, you find her again. The same cat from before, or maybe her great-great-grandchild. She doesn't move as you pass. She just watches, probably judging your posture. You give her a little bow anyway, because she deserves it, and you're starting to think. So does the onion. By now, the sun hangs high and hot, painting the Nile in glare and turning the dusty streets into slow-cooked trails. You pull your hood a little lower, wipe your brow, and follow the noise, the buzz of the open market. Voices rise and fall like a melody in motion, bartering, haggling, children squealing, the rhythmic thud of mortar pounding spices. You step into the bustle, and it hits you full in the face. The smell of grilled fish, dried dates, and, hello, old friend, a mountain of raw onions. Here, in the very heart of daily commerce, onions are everywhere. Stacks of them piled like little pyramids, braids of dried bulbs hanging from wooden beams, thin slices marinating in clay dishes, ready to top the day's lentil stew. And right next to them, cats. Lots of cats. They weave between legs, sprawl beneath tables, leap effortlessly onto fruit carts. One sits confidently atop a barrel of salted fish like she's guarding a royal treasure. And no one shoos her away. If anything, the fishmonger scratches her ears on the way past. Welcome to meoeconomics, Egyptian style. Mainstream fact, in marketplaces like this, cats weren't pests. They were protectors. Their presence kept food stalls free of rodents, which helped prevent spoilage and disease. Merchants valued them, sometimes even pooled money to feed and care for them. In some districts, you couldn't open a shop without a feline license holder curled up somewhere inside. And the onions? They weren't just ingredients, they were currency. Literally, there are records of workers being paid in onions. Construction teams, field hands, and even pyramid builders received their daily rations of bread, beer, and onions. Not as a snack, though they probably ate them too, but as medicine, sustenance, and, some claimed, protection from the intense sun and disease. One ancient scribe complained about his wages in a letter. 3 loaves, 2 jars, and only 1 onion. Must I suffer for your stinginess? Historians still argue whether onions genuinely helped boost endurance and health, or whether that belief was more cultural placebo. But either way, the value was real. Onions were portable, preserved well, and had spiritual cachet, a rare combo in the ancient world. You pass a merchant arranging a row of small amulets shaped like cats and onions. They're carved from soapstone, wood, and even painted ceramic. He sees your interest and winks. Protection, he says. For your house, for your purse, for your dreams. You ask which is stronger, cat or onion. He leans in conspiratorially. Cat by day, onion by night. You're not sure if he's joking. Probably not. You step into a stall selling oils and perfumes. Glass bottles catch the light like frozen teardrops. Some are labeled with symbols, a sistrum, a spiral, a paw print. One has an onion carved into its wax seal. What's this one? The vendor picks it up reverently. It's not for scent, he explains. It's for blocking scent. We call it Bastet's breath. Made from onion, myrrh, and river clay. You raise an eyebrow. So, the opposite of perfume. He shrugs. Depends on what you're trying to keep away. Quirky tidbit. Ancient Egyptian workers sometimes rubbed themselves with onion-based balms not to smell better, but to keep evil spirits or ill fortune at bay. A kind of olfactory shield. Think of it like spiritual bug spray, effective, if not exactly flattering. Outside the stall, a group of children chase a cat through the stalls. She zips between jars and jugs, then vanishes beneath a pile of baskets. The kids giggle, bow deeply, and whisper, "Bastet protect you," before scampering off. You stop at a food stand and are handed a slice of flatbread, topped with something brown, sticky, and mouth-watering. Caramelized onions, chopped dates, and a sprinkle of cumin. You take a bite and nearly weep. It's sweet, savory, grounding. You could probably make a religion out of this. Actually, maybe someone already did. A woman beside you nods toward the food. First recipe my grandmother taught me, she says proudly. We serve it on feast days. And funerals. Same dish. She shrugs. Life and death are both hungry. Open scholarly debate. Some historians believe that specific onion-based recipes were served as part of ritual meals, especially those involving Bastet or the afterlife. Others argue the evidence is too thin, and that onions were just so common they showed up everywhere. It's hard to say where faith ends and flavor begins. You finish your bread, thank the vendor, and keep walking. Near the edge of the market, you pass a stone platform with carvings on each side, cats on one face, onions on another. It's unclear whether it's a shrine or a bench, but someone has left a few offerings, a toy mouse, a fishbone, and a tiny pyramid of sliced red onion. You sit for a while and watch the world spin. Cats dart, merchants shout, children shriek, flies hover, and everything is woven together: food, trade, faith, survival. Because in Egypt, the economy didn't just run on gold and grain. It ran on fur and flavor. You rise, brushing crumbs from your lap. You're full, but not just from food. You feel fed by something ancient. Some strange assurance that even in the chaos of trade and toil, people found small ways to bless the ordinary. A good cat, a sharp onion, a loaf of bread, all holy in their own way. You leave the market behind, your clothes perfumed with smoke and spice, your heart oddly comforted by the purring commerce of cats and onions. The sun has slipped into its descent now, casting long golden shadows. The wind changes too, carrying not just dust, but the faint electric pull of the unseen. You're heading to the outskirts again, where the scent of roasted fish gives way to herbs and old parchment. You pass a line of trees twisted with old rope charms and onion skins tied like paper lanterns. A soft rattle in the wind, like bones that forgot to be scary. Welcome to the domain of spells. You duck under a low stone arch and into a small compound where papyrus scrolls dry on strings, herbs hang in thick bundles, and cats loiter like lazy librarians. At the center, an elderly woman sits cross-legged, a reed pen in one hand and a chunk of resin in the other. She looks up without surprise. "I've been expecting you," she says flatly. You blink. "I say that to everyone," she adds. You like her already. She gestures to a flat table covered in papyrus fragments, most of them covered in dense symbols, protective spells, house blessings, healing charms, and a few stranger things. You pick one up. It's illustrated with a cat seated on a hill, facing a dark figure emerging from a cave. Between them, a stylized onion glowing like a little sun. Below it, a spell written in tight curls. "Protection from night terrors," she says. "For children, or restless adults." She gives you a look. Mainstream fact: Egyptians used spells, called Heka, for just about everything. Protection, fertility, travel, dreams, death. Heka wasn't magic in the modern fantasy sense. It was a spiritual technology, a force woven into the world, accessible by those who knew how to write it, say it, or brew it into tea. And two of the most commonly invoked symbols? Cats and onions. You watch as the woman grinds dried onion peel into a fine powder. She sprinkles it into a small pouch alongside frankincense, a smidge of salt, and the shaved edge of a cat-shaped amulet. "Nightjar," she explains. "You hang it near your bed. For dreams. For the things that wait outside them." You don't ask for details. Quirky tidbit. Some Egyptians believed onions could distract or confuse malevolent spirits, who would get caught up in the layers and lose their sense of direction. A sort of supernatural labyrinth. Meanwhile, cats were thought to guard the edges of the dream world, their eyes able to spot what yours couldn't. That twitching in their sleep? Maybe not a dream. Maybe a battle. She shows you another scroll, more elaborate. It depicts a traveler crossing a desert, flanked by two cats. The wind behind him is full of serpents, which shrink away from a glowing onion tied around his waist. "Warding spell," she says. "For long journeys. Or business trips. Or in-laws." You laugh. She doesn't. Historians still argue whether common people used these spells regularly or if they were reserved for priestly rituals. But the evidence suggests everyday Egyptians believed in layering protections on their doorways, around their necks, even in their pockets. Especially when night fell and the line between the living and the otherworldly grew thin. She hands you a dried onion slice, carefully scored with a tiny sigil. "Place this under your tongue before you speak to someone who lies often." You nod seriously. "Will it make me see the truth?" "No, but it will make your breath terrible. They'll leave quickly." You grin. She softens. "But yes, the scent confuses deception. Truth doesn't like to hide in strong smells." You pocket it. At the corner of the compound, a young apprentice is painting symbols onto the fur of a very tolerant cat. "Spiral here. Eye there." little lines that shimmer in the low light. The cat doesn't flinch, just purrs and blinks at you slowly, like she's been painted 100 times before. You walk over. Is she sacred? The apprentice nods. All cats are. Some just show it more. On the far wall hangs a charm made entirely of onion skins, delicately woven into the shape of a sistrum, Bastet's rattle. When the wind moves through it, it makes the gentlest sound, like distant rain or a whisper you almost understand. You're about to ask more when the old woman says, "That's enough for now." Heka doesn't like to be stared at too long. You thank her. She gives you a pouch filled with a few crumbling herbs, a tiny wooden cat, and a folded square of papyrus. "For your pillow," she says, "and for the things that wake you." As you step back into the twilight, you feel it again, that strange sense of protection. Not like armor, like a warm circle drawn around your shadow. Cats and onions. Sacred protectors, watchers of boundaries, keepers of the quiet spaces where fear likes to creep in. You pass another charm hanging from a tree. 3 dried onions tied in a triangle, with a feather dangling in the center. A small cat sleeps beneath it, breathing softly, dream guard on duty. Open scholarly debate. Were these rituals mere folk practices, or deeply embedded belief systems passed through generations? Were the symbols used because they worked, or did they work because they were used? You don't have answers. But as you feel the dried onion slice shift in your pocket and hear the soft rustle of the spell paper tucked near your chest, you suspect belief was enough. And belief, when wrapped in layers and purring softly at your feet, is sometimes the strongest spell of all. You wander back toward the heart of the city, the spell pouch thumping softly in your pocket with each step. The sky is heavy with gold now, sinking lower with the sun, and the buildings around you are bathed in that particular Egyptian light. Hot, soft, almost holy. You're not headed toward a temple this time, or a granary, or a grave. You're heading to the palace. Yes, that palace. The air smells cleaner here, somehow. Less fish, more frankincense. The stone under your feet has been swept recently, and guards stand on either side of the entrance with polished spears and unreadable expressions. They let you pass without a word. Apparently, even the palace is used to strange visitors trailing cat fur and onion crumbs. You're shown into a broad courtyard where the queen herself might lounge during the heat of day. But right now, it's occupied by a low gathering of attendants and dozens of cats. They stretch across the steps, nestling into woven baskets, perch in the sunniest corners like solar panels and fur coats. And they're dressed. Mainstream historical fact. Some elite Egyptian households, especially royal ones, adorned their favorite cats with jewelry. Tiny gold earrings, beaded collars, engraved charms. Not just as decoration, but as status. Your pet reflected your rank. If you were powerful, your cat was fabulous. You spot one slinking past with ankle bangles, actual golden hoops, gently clinking with each step. Another wears a collar studded with tiny carved fish. And one particularly smug-looking feline lounges beside a water basin wearing. Is that a linen cloak? Oh yes, tiny fashion statements for the divine furballs. You're not even surprised anymore. A seamstress is nearby, embroidering a miniature sash with the symbol of Bastet. When you ask if it's for a temple priestess, she snorts. "No," she says. "It's for Mehe. She just gave birth to 3 kittens." The sash is a blessing of fertility and protection. You glance over. Mehe, a sleek gray cat, nurses her little ones in the shade of a papyrus plant. She lifts her head to look at you, then returns to bathing her babies. Royal treatment? You bet. You're offered a seat beneath a fig tree and handed a chilled cloth for your forehead. Someone even offers you a small plate, dried fruit, nuts, and thinly sliced, marinated onions laid out in delicate spirals. You try a slice. Sweet, sharp, and surprisingly floral. "This was the pharaoh's favorite," says the attendant. Quirky tidbit. Royal Egyptian kitchens used onions not only in stews and breads, but also in desserts and perfumes. That's right, perfumes. Mixed with lotus, myrrh, and honey, onion extract added complexity to the scent and, according to some, protected the wearer from jealous eyes and foul air. You sniff the plate again. It does smell oddly regal. Nearby, a small fountain trickles over a stone basin shaped like a paw. Cats drink lazily from it, licking at the ripples. One dips a paw in, then smacks a passing kitten with it. Palace life, apparently, hasn't changed much in 3,000 years. You're guided into a side chamber, a low room draped with gauzy linen. This is where palace officials keep records of offerings, imports, and rituals. One wall is dedicated entirely to cat-related entries, dates of births, ceremonial feedings, even official mourning periods for specific felines. You spot one name repeated several times, Nefermat's Whisker. Royal Mauser, the scribe explains. Lived for 18 years. Buried in a gold-lined box. 2 full weeks of eyebrow shaving across the palace. You smile. Somehow, the image of mourning courtiers, freshly shaved and weeping over a retired hunter, feels both ridiculous and deeply touching. Open scholarly debate. Was this all theater? Did royalty truly love their cats? Or were the rituals mostly about projecting divine alignment with Bastet? Were cat funerals genuine grief or state propaganda? Probably both. Egyptians didn't separate emotion from ritual the way we do now. If you loved your cat, you honored her. If your status demanded it, you honored her louder. You move back into the courtyard. A young girl chases a kitten through the columns, laughing. One of the guards flicks a bit of dried fish from his pouch to a nearby Mauser. And in the center of it all, like a living statue, sits a white cat with amber eyes, wearing a thin diadem across her head. She watches you. You nod. She doesn't blink. It's the most aristocratic thing you've seen all day. Suddenly, a servant appears with a basket of goods, fresh fish, warm bread, and a braided rope of red onions so large it looks like a ceremonial garland. These are for the temple, she says. A monthly offering. And just like that, the onions return, not as food, but as tribute. Symbol of fertility. Currency of reverence. A rope of thanks to the goddess who made cats sacred and onions divine. You help carry it to the procession gate, where a young priest waits with a cart and a small cage of kittens, temple-bound for training, perhaps, or just going home. As you turn to leave the palace, a page hurries after you with a linen pouch. For your cat, he says. I don't have one. You will. You peer inside. A miniature golden bell, a dried onion sliver wrapped in silk, and a soft feather tied with red thread. You think of me, hey, of Whisker, of the carved statues and temple guards and sacred snacks. And you wonder, in a world full of noise and kings and wars and monuments, what if the truly divine things were the ones curled at your feet, or sizzling in a pot, or tucked behind your ear for luck? What if holiness has fur and layers? You tuck the pouch away and step out into the fading sun. The palace grows smaller behind you, swallowed by orange dust and the hush that comes when the day exhales. You walk alone now, along a dirt path that stretches toward a low ridge overlooking the desert. But you're not the only one out here. Ahead, a crowd gathers, soldiers, priests, merchants, even children perched on boulders like sleepy falcons. You edge closer. The air is electric, the tension thick. Whispers buzz like flies. All eyes are locked on a line of foreign soldiers in gleaming armor, standing across from Egyptian guards. And in the middle, cats. Dozens of them. Soft. Silent, unbothered. They mill between the two sides, grooming, blinking, napping. You count at least 30. One of the foreign commanders steps forward, sword unsheathed. His face is grim. The Egyptian general lifts a hand and shouts something you don't understand, but the tone is unmistakable. Do not move. Mainstream historical fact. In the Battle of Pelusium, 525 BCE, the Persian king Cambyses II is said to have used cats and other animals sacred to the Egyptians as shields, knowing full well the defenders would hesitate to strike. The Egyptians, terrified of offending Bastet, reportedly surrendered rather than harm the cats. Whether the story's exaggerated or real, it stuck around, because it made sense in a world where harming a cat was worse than treason. And here, now, you can see it in their eyes. The Egyptian soldiers are frozen, not in fear of swords, but in fear of sacrilege. You inch closer to the edge of the ridge, where an old man sits, squinting at the standoff. They won't fight, he says quietly. Not with the cats in the way. Would you? You ask. He shakes his head. Not unless I want my soul dragged backward through the underworld by angry gods with claws. Fair. Quirky tidbit. In some fringe beliefs, it was said that Bastet's wrath didn't come as fire or famine, but as endless misfortune. Lost crops, Illness. Inexplicable flatulence. Even sand in your bed forever. A slow, cosmic irritation. You watch as a single white cat strolls straight between the armies, tail high. Both sides tense. No one moves. One of the Egyptian soldiers kneels. It's not surrender. It's respect. Open scholarly debate. Was the use of sacred animals in warfare a one-time event or a broader tactic? Did the Persians understand the full spiritual implications, or were they just very lucky strategists? Hard to say, but the story endures, and that says something on its own. A priest steps forward now, holding aloft an onion wreath. It's simple, just dried bulbs, twisted vines, and a symbol of eternal protection. He places it on the ground between the armies. A peace offering, a dare, a shield that stinks. One of the cats sniffs it, then lies down on top of it. You feel the air shift. The foreign commander lowers his weapon. A breath of tension escapes the crowd. No battle today. You walk away from the ridge with your head buzzing. You can't stop picturing it. The quiet power of a creature no taller than your shin bringing armies to a halt. No blood. No shouting. Just pause, purrs, and onions. You think back on everything you've seen. Cats revered not for what they did, but for who they were. Onions valued not just for taste, but for protection, for life, for symbolic strength. And together, they made empires hesitate. You pass a child on the path home, holding a small figurine, half cat, half onion, carved from wood. He grins, holds it up proudly. "This is Bastet," he says. "My war charm." You raise an eyebrow. "That's a real god." He shrugs. "It is now." You nod. Fair enough. In a world where cats win wars and onions stop ghosts, why shouldn't someone invent a cat-onion demigod? Back in the city, the streets are quieter. Torches flicker to life, casting feline shadows that slip between doorways. You pass a shopkeeper closing up for the night. She pauses to place a single onion on her windowsill and kiss the head of a curled-up tabby before locking the door. You don't need to ask what it means. You know now. The next time someone tells you history is written by generals and kings, remember this. One night, long ago, no one fired a single arrow because they were afraid to upset a bunch of cats. And one vegetable may have saved more lives than all the swords combined. You round the last corner home as the sun finally vanishes. It's cool now. Still. Holy, in a quiet way. And from a nearby rooftop, a cat watches you pass, silent, golden-eyed, and completely unimpressed. The sky is now an indigo bowl freckled with stars, and the city hums softly like it's breathing in its sleep. You walk slowly, feet dusty, heart full of stories. The torchlight has dimmed, the market's gone quiet, and the cats rule the streets once again. Ghostly shapes brushing against walls, darting beneath carts, leaping effortlessly onto ledges like shadows with whiskers. But something's changed. You can feel it. You're heading toward the temples again, but not for ritual, not for burial, not for incense and solemn hymns. No, this time it's about memory. A closing chapter. The final echoes of an era. The temple of Bastet looms before you, majestic still, though quieter than when you first arrived. Fewer visitors, fewer offerings. Even the air smells different now. Less like onions and smoke, more like sandstone and distance. You pass through the columned halls. No crowds, no processions. Just carvings and shadows and the soft, occasional padding of a cat you don't see. You step into the central chamber and realize the offerings have grown sparse. Mainstream historical fact. By the end of the ancient Egyptian civilization, especially under Roman rule, many of the old traditions began to fade. Temples were abandoned. Worship waned. Bastet's prominence shrank. Her images were still carved, still respected, but her festivals no longer shook the cities. The cats? They remained. But the sacredness, that quiet awe, began to erode. You sit on a stone bench, where once a priestess might have chanted for hours. The frescoes are cracked. The altar is bare save for a single withered onion and the curled-up form of a cat, asleep, unmoved. You reach out, gently. She opens one eye, regards you, and then shuts it again. Acceptance. Or boredom. You chuckle softly. You wonder if she knows. You walk to a side chamber now nearly empty, once filled with scrolls, incense, and gold-trimmed collars. Now dust, silence, and scattered feathers. The temple cats still roam, still keep watch, but they are fewer, older, untethered from reverence. On one wall, you find a faded inscription. When the world forgets, the cat will still watch. Chillingly poetic. You press your palm to it and feel nothing but stone. You step outside. The city stretches below you, lamps flickering, quiet laughter floating through the warm night air. People are moving on. Times are changing. Quirky tidbit. There are records of early Christians in Egypt, Copts, reusing temple stones, including cat shrines, for church construction. One stone, once adorned with Bastet's image, was flipped and carved into a baptismal font. A strange kind of reincarnation. The divine repurposed. The cat rehomed. You pass a pile of broken statues near the temple wall, discarded relics. One cat figurine lies half buried, its tail snapped off. You gently dust it off and place it on a ledge, just in case someone, or something, still cares. Open scholarly debate. Did the reverence truly die, or just change form? Did the sacredness of cats fade completely, or did it seep into folk beliefs, whispered superstitions, kitchen altars, bedtime stories? Because cats never disappeared, and neither did onions. They just slipped into the background. From gods to house guests. From holy to helpful. And isn't that a kind of survival too? You walk slowly down the temple steps, the stone warm even in the night. Behind you, the cat on the altar rises, stretches, and follows silently. At the edge of the courtyard, you stop. There's a small clay bowl, mostly forgotten, left by someone earlier. It contains 2 fish bones, a wilted flower, and a half-dried red onion slice. A last offering, a memory of belief. You leave a soft whisper behind as you go. Not a prayer exactly, but maybe a thank you. And as you round the corner, the cat doesn't follow. She returns to her place, still watching, still guarding. You reach the city streets again, quieter now than you've ever heard them. Even the wind seems to tiptoe. A child sleeps on a mat near a doorway, a fat orange cat curled protectively beside his head. A dried onion hangs from the doorpost. Not for cooking, for dreaming safely. You smile. Because even if the gods have stepped back, even if the temples crumble, the rituals remain. In softer forms, simpler gestures. A bowl by the fire, a slice on the windowsill, a purring weight on your chest as you drift off. Maybe the Egyptians didn't lose their reverence. Maybe they just brought it home. You walk a little slower now, footsteps quieter, not from fatigue, but from reverence. The streets of ancient Egypt are soft underfoot, sand packed down by centuries, whispering under your soles. The light of distant torches flickers off clay walls, casting elongated shadows that sometimes look like cats when you're not paying attention. You find yourself in a quiet courtyard. No temple, no altar, just a wide open space where the stars shine a little brighter and the silence carries more meaning than any prayer. You sit on a worn stone step, lean back against a wall, and exhale. A cat pads into view. Not painted, not mummified, just real. She sits beside you without a sound, eyes forward, tail curled, as if she's been waiting for this story to end. Or maybe she's part of it. You reach into your pouch and pull out the dried onion charm the healer gave you. You hold it up to the starlight. Watch its papery edge catch the glow. It crackles like memory, like something ancient still rustling in the folds of the world. This, after all, was never just about history. It was about what we choose to remember. The Egyptians worshipped cats because they embodied the balance between ferocity and grace, mystery and affection. Because they killed rats without being asked. Because they purred against the chest like heartbeat translators. Because they stared into nothing, and you couldn't help but wonder if they saw the gods there. They honored onions because they were shaped like eternity, because their scent warded off illness and evil, because they lasted through drought, through flood, through grief. Because in every meal and every medicine and every burial, onions were there, unassuming but essential. Mainstream fact. Even late into Egypt's history, long after the major temples had faded, onions remained part of burial traditions. Simple graves often held a bulb beside the body. Not for royalty, for regular people. A final layer of protection, perhaps, or simply a final nod to what had always mattered. And now, here you are, centuries removed, trying to piece it all together. You think of everything you've seen. The priestesses and their sleek temple guardians. The granary walls scratched by tiny claws. The market stalls thick with onion garlands. The funerals, the spells, the soft purring sentries watching over sleeping children. And that moment, at the edge of war, when no one dared to lift a sword because a cat stood between them. Open scholarly debate. Was all this devotion exaggerated by ancient records? Were the temples really that full of cats? Did onions actually sit in the eye sockets of pharaohs, or was that just one embalmer with a weird sense of humor? Maybe. But here's what's not debated. They mattered. They mattered enough to carve into stone, to paint on tomb walls, to bury, to honor, to write into songs, stories, and the memory of an entire civilization. Because cats and onions weren't just useful. They were sacred in their ordinariness. And somehow, that made them extraordinary. You look to your left. The cat beside you yawns, licks her paw, and begins a slow, deliberate grooming session. She's not waiting for your applause. She doesn't care what you've learned. She's just being, as cats do, entirely self-contained, entirely present. You set the onion charm down beside her. She sniffs it, blinks once, and leaves it there. Of course she does. Somewhere in the distance, a drum thuds softly, faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat tucked under the night. A few voices carry over the rooftops, laughter chasing the tail end of some festival you'll never see. But you don't need to. You've already witnessed enough. The moon is high now, bright, clean, a perfect circle, like an onion ring, like a cat's eye, like the way stories turn back on themselves, always landing you where you started, but softer somehow. You close your eyes, lean your head back, and listen to the stillness. Not silence, stillness. There's a difference. In the stillness, you hear the world breathing. Hear the cats shifting through alleyways like velvet ghosts. Hear the memories wrapped in linen, tucked with offerings, laid down with care. Hear the centuries rustle. Hear the onion peels whisper. And you finally understand. The Egyptians didn't worship cats and onions because they were strange. They worshipped them because they were familiar. Because the most ordinary things, given enough time and love and ritual, become divine. You feel the night wrap around you like a soft shawl. A distant purr. A rustle of paper skin. And the quiet comfort of knowing that some things are eternal, not because they're grand, but because they're loved over and over again. You smile, and sleep begins to pull you under. Now, let yourself settle. The cats are quiet now, curled in their corners, tucked in their shadows. The torches burn low, flickering warm, their light barely more than memory. You are safe here. The wind stirs gently across the stone, as if the past itself is breathing you to sleep. Somewhere, an old priestess hums a lullaby no one remembers. Somewhere, a kitten chases dreams across a rooftop, and the world keeps turning. Let your breath slow. Let your body grow heavy. Let the stories curl around you like linen wraps, soft, secure, filled with the scent of something both ancient and oddly comforting. Let the onions guard your dreams, each layer a shield, each ring a memory of the lives that came before. Let the cats walk the perimeter of your rest, watching silently, blinking slowly, chasing away what doesn't belong. Because you belong here. You always have. And now, with the night full and the moon high, there's nothing left to do but sleep. You're held. You're home. You're history now. Sweet dreams.